Cool, let's go. You guys want to ask any questions at any time, just go ahead. I'm glad to answer. Today's session is just going to be mainly me working through the different assets, and so I won't be doing a specific tutorial. I'll just be working on the different assets. Just let me know if the audio is okay. Okay, so I'm going to be using some of the ZBrush's surface functions. So basically, it's just a fractal kind of thing, and you can actually change the way that the curve is displayed. We have options to increase and decrease the noise itself. Then we have the scale detailer, which you can increase and decrease the strength. We have options to blend a noise plugin as well. I'm going to choose OK just to kind of preview what that looks like on the mesh. It's kind of looking cool. I want to create some sort of sedimentary effect. So let's see. I'll go back to edit mode, and I'm going to use the Y scale, or maybe X scale. Yeah, it's going to be Y axis. What that's going to do is kind of create these lines running on a horizontal axis and create this stacked effect. And then we can play with the graph just to kind of choose where we want certain effects to be more flatter. Something like that. That's looking good. So with that, I'm going to be creating a new layer. It's currently in recording mode. And then when I apply this to the mesh, that information will then be stored in that layer. Okay, first of all, the first thing that you'll notice, it kind of inflates a bit too much, so it just means that our current strength is maybe a bit too high, so we'll have to be a little bit more subtle with it. Maybe something like that, and then apply it to the mesh. Okay, it's still inflating. In fact, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to use the noise as a mask, and then I can use my move tool and then manually sculpt in where I think it's necessary to kind of push the details. So that's a nice way of approaching it as well. It gives you more control. And instead of inflating it all over, you choose where and how much. Cool. I'll clear the mask, smooth it one more time. In fact, before I do that, I'm going to flatten some of these angles at the top, because I still want to keep that cartoony look. So we'll flatten some areas, and then other areas I will manually enhance myself. So I'm going to be using slash brush, kind of carving into the surface. In fact, there is this one, or flatten, kind of creates these nice blade sharp angles. And that's going to help me carve into this mesh. I'll pull out some of these edges as well. Let's look at it with everything else in view. It's too round for me. I think we have to get this shape a little bit more angled. So what I'm going to do is maybe use the Move Elastic brush. Let's have a look. Move Elastic. And I'm going to reduce the polygons. And I'm going to wiggle this around until I start getting a little bit more sharper angles. I'm going to raise it up a bit so it looks like it's properly wedged onto this square boulder. Yeah, looks a bit droopy, so I'll just gonna build this up a little bit more. How's it, guys? If you have any questions, let me know. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to solo it, and then I'm going to use my lasso tool to mask out a chunk, reverse it, and then that way I can kind of nudge certain things more in between crevices to make it feel more like sedimentary and things stacking on top of each other. Clear that mask. I'm going to do the same thing here. Reverse that. Push that underneath there. I'm going to reverse my mask. Push this up a bit. And then I'm going to use a bit of the trim dynamic just to harden some of the angles. And do that. Use my move tool once again. Okay, I'm going to go back up the subdivisions, and then I will be using the orbs brush just to kind of slash this a little bit more. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is jump back to my regular masking brush with a dotted stroke, and then kind of push this in, smooth that out a bit more, reverse the mask, smooth that edges profile out as well. And then I can go in once again and use some of my trim dynamic brush effects. Okay, so I'll have to look at this in unsolid mode so I don't add details or unnecessary details in areas that I'll never really notice. So I'll rather focus on areas where I will be seeing the effects. So I'm enhancing some of the edge details where it's been carved. Okay. What we can do is we can run another noise on top of this on only the areas that is unmasked. So what I'm going to do is just quickly paint a rough mask where I would like to have it a little bit more detailed. I'm going to reverse it and blend the transition, soften that edge, apply another noise, and we can see how that's affecting it. So I'm going to say mask by noise, and then once again I can then use the, let's see if we can get this. I'm going to sharpen the mask, because the mask is a bit too soft. So now I'm just adding the noise to only the areas that I've selected. So I'm going to clear that. So we've got some nice rock effects happening. Stop section, especially this side, is a bit undetailed, so we just have to maybe do that as well. Mask by noise, sharpen the mask, and use the move tool again. Okay, that's a bit better. Okay, so at this point, if I want to subdivide the mesh from 55,000 to one extra subdiv, I need to go to my layers and then bake them all down, because otherwise it's not going to allow me to subdivide one up from there. So Control D, there we go. With all of that applied, I'm going to go and apply another noise. The detail will be pretty much exactly in the same spot because we didn't change the offset, so it's going to be applied exactly in the same place. So that's quite convenient. Say again, mask by noise. And we can then use the move tool to draw out that detail. I'm going to inverse the mask. Okay, actually no, I'm just going to clear it and then add the additional carving details where I think I need it more. So I'm back to my slash brush. Okay, so we're only on 221,000. I'm going to subdivide this one more time, because every time you subdivide, you're actually rounding out your details and you're losing a lot of that sharpness. So that might be something that you want, it might not be. So I have to be careful of that. This one kind of sticks out too much, so I'm just going to go ahead and kind of crush it down. Don't need that. Okay, we have too many of these sharp edges, which I don't like, so I'm just going to go ahead and flatten that immediately. I don't see any benefit from having those too big. How's it, man? Okay, so I'm gonna use the orbs edges brush. This is a nice one to kind of create these blade sharp, crisp, sliced corners. And I'm going to try and keep the brush small, otherwise we're losing a lot of those fine details. This rock seems very realistic at the moment. I'll have to go in and at some points and just kind of soften the details so it's not so hyper realistic. So I'm just waiting for ZBrush to save here. Okay, cool. Ah, come on. So I'm going to use my reference a little bit more to kind of see what we should do with this thing. So we've got some nice angles here that we can utilize. I'm going to put my reference image as a texture inside of ZBrush so you guys can see. So I'm just going to say import. I'll load that in, select that, and then say add to spotlight. Close lightbox, and then I'm just going to scale this down. I'll leave this off to the side. Press Z to hide that, and I'm going to turn off the spotlight projection, which it is. So that means I can sculpt without needing to project through the image. That's what I want. Cool. So let's look at this unsoloed. Hey Andre, so what is that a question? Are you asking me something about the known issues with the ZBrush? Or are you referring to that whole thing with it hanging on me while I was trying to do something or saving something? I'm not too scared to nudge things around in the low poly form because I know the details will be preserved for the most part when I subdivide back up again. Okay. Excellent. Subdivide back up one more time. Go ahead and carve a big chunk of this, make it nice and flat. I'm going to use the H polish instead. Doesn't have to look exactly the same way, but I know if it's required of you to make something look exactly the same, then you need to practice that. This is personal preference. I'm just having some fun here. Okay, let's continue. Oh, it's saving again. Okay, there we go. Let's continue. Okay, I think I'm fine with this for now. I'm gonna jump onto the next guy. This one I'll probably stick to the reference image a little bit more. Subdivide this 1 or 2 times. Let's start off with the trim dynamic brush. Can't really see this side, so what I'm going to do is isolate only a few elements in my subtool menu. So I'm definitely going to turn all the visibility off by holding down shift and clicking on the subtool, and then just toggling on the ones that I actually want active or visible. Right click, so like that would be a good setup. And maybe one of those, that pillar, I've got so many subtools, it's actually ridiculous. It's going to be this guy, so right click, there we go. And then we need the stone that's stacked on top of it. Let's see, where's that guy? I'm going to press M. Just quickly run through these guys and see which one it is. Okay, it's those two that I'm working on right now. There it is, second one. There we go. This way. Ah, I did it again. So click that one, right click, make it visible, and then alt click on the bottom subtool. There we go. Okay, so at this point I'm just going to go ahead and make a masking selection and start moving things around to kind of give it more a manual approach instead of trying to use my trim dynamic brush to such an extent. Okay, so top angle, I'm going to solo that guy. And kind of mask out the top. I'm going to reverse the mask, and I'm just going to use my edge polish brush to very quickly flatten this. It's a very quick way of doing it. And then masking out this section here. And give it more of an angle. Okay. And then the rest of the work I can do with the trim dynamic brush, so it's a little bit quicker. In fact, let's see if my flatten brush will work a bit better. We don't have enough polygons to really make this edge nice and crisp, so just gonna nudge things around until it starts making more sense to what I want. In fact, let's leave it like that for now. Okay, I'm liking these hard angles. This is a bit soft, so what I'm gonna do is make a mask and only have that area being affected by my brush. I jump to my move tool. Maybe reverse it. Sharpen this edge. Now it feels like a hard stone. Excellent. So Control D, sharpen that. Now I could go and dynamesh this, but that means I'll end up losing my low poly model. That might be something that I want or not. In this case, I'm going to stick with just what I have right now instead of overcomplicating my workflow. Now, especially for beginners, it's best to first learn how to build base low poly models, and then later on transition into creative workflows with dynamesh and so on. Okay, I think I like that as my base shape. And now we can start carving in some more specific slash effects. I'm going to hit Control D one more time. We are running out of polygons, so now I need to force the polygons to do what I want. That's unfortunately the issue with starting off with a base mesh and then pushing the base mesh past the point that it was intended for. So now we have to just kind of work with what we have right now. Okay, let's see. Maybe if I can use the edge polish in this corner. Yeah, that could work. Make that angle sharper. Okay, same thing here at the bottom. It looks like two completely different stones. The first one versus the second one. And we can definitely see now we have to kind of either compensate this one or that one because of the variation and the difference. So I'm going to go down this one's subdivision levels all the way down to, well, for the most part all the way down. And then I'm just going to pull this stuff down just to make it feel more subtle and rested on top of this thing instead of making it feel like it's floating. If you guys want to know anything about specific shortcuts, just let me know. In fact, I'm going to run a little app here which is called OSD hotkey. I'm going to run this guy, and everything that I do now will then be captured on screen. So if I press Alt, for instance, it's going to show Alt. I hope that helps you guys a bit more. I go into transparency mode so I can see what is lying underneath this rock. I go into ghost mode. just from the bottom side, push these polygons back up. And then turn transparency off. And that feels more like what I want. Okay. I'm going to try and bump up the volume here. Is the volume better? Maybe I'm just talking a bit soft today. Just in the comments, just let me know if you guys can hear me properly. If you're having a problem with the audio, just let me know so I can see if I can adjust it on this side. Okay, excellent, that's good. How you doing, Bron? I'm just checking some reference off screen, guys. Just look at some ideas. so almost there. Okay, cool. I don't really know what it looks like on the back side, but I'm just taking my own judgment to kind of deal with what I think it should look like. I'm going to go and change my normal current stroke into a lasso profile, which helps me kind of carve out things in a way based off a custom mask. Just waiting for this thing to respond. So let's see. This was the trim dynamic brush. Just carving this away. And I'm going to use the Damien standard brush just to slash this through a little bit deeper. I'm not going to see the bottom, so I don't care too much for that. Awesome, man. Solid this guy out. Run this crack through here. Just connecting it to obvious lines to make it seem like it's running throughout this thing. In fact, I'm going to jump to my slash curve brush. I'm going to subdivide the mesh one more time, and then enhance the details a bit more. Excellent. Is my audio better, guys? Just clear respond. Excellent. I think that's good enough. I think this one in general is too detailed. I'll probably have to remove some of the details. Just gonna do a quick save here. I'd like to know where everyone is from. If you guys can just leave a comment down below just to tell me where you're from. Okay, I think we need a little bit more sharper angles in some places. So I'm gonna just hint at these things a little bit more. Even if I end up destroying a lot of the detail, I'm not too precious about the details. I'm never 100% happy with what I'm working on. I might decide to try a different route. So over here I think we should maybe just I'll use the clear brush just to kind of fill this up again. What I like about the clay brush, it provides me a way to fill the gaps in between these crevices without overlapping polygons. It's pushing it to the surface, and then from there you can rework it again. Okay, I'm going to use the diamond stand again, just to carve in some of these cracks a bit more. Okay, I think I'm liking this a lot more, doing it by hand. And especially doing cartoony stuff, you don't want to be adding too much noise. You'd rather have more flatter shades of color kind of doing the work for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and just hint at specific angles. Let's try that again. There we go, that's better. Nope, I'll do that by hand instead of trying to use that brush. Okay. I think that's better, much better. Falls in line with the rest of the cartoony stuff. Okay, I'm gonna call this one done for now. Let's bring back everything again, just to kind of look at it as a whole, just to kind of get a general scope of whether things are fitting in together or not. Okay, I'm liking it. I think this bottom one needs to be a little bit bigger, so I'm going to go to the lower subdiv, and I'm going to go to W, which is your transpose tool. I'm going to tap on one of these vertices, and then I'll jump to my scale tool. I'm just going to increase it that way. In fact, before I do that, I'm going to move this circle handle to the base. Turn perspective off so that I can line it up better. And then I'll be using my scale tool, because then it scales from that point. That's better, much better. I'm going to nudge this backwards as well. Yes, that's looking better. Right. Any questions so far, guys? Okay. I'll rework this plank. This one over here. I'm gonna hit solo just to quickly check the geometry. So the first thing I want to address is the fact that these corners are not yet beveled. So I can send this model back to Maya, fix that up. About the question, the ZBrush and Maya question, yeah, I don't know. It depends on how technical you are as an artist. You would say that Maya is both very creative and very technical, depending on which areas you're going to be focusing on. If you're a digital sculptor or 3D artist and you're looking for a tool to quickly get into sculpting without needing to worry about the overhead of technical workflows and lots of buttons to press, I would say Mudbox is probably your best bet to get into first, just to get the hang of sculpting and what it's about and so on. And then if you feel like you want to up your game from there, you can then jump into ZBrush. But then again, you can also just go straight into ZBrush and learn how all those technical workflows make your sculpting process so much easier. So in terms of complexity, I would say about 3 to 4 weeks to learn the most basic functions of ZBrush, just for you to be able to sculpt and do your basic object manipulation. But if you're looking at some serious hard surface sculpting and like hyper realistic characters and so on, I wouldn't say that ZBrush is that easy to learn, especially if you're on a tight deadline, so in that regard, I would say Mudbox is probably your best bet. But a ZBrush is the most powerful sculpting tool. It's got everything you need to make a really good looking model. Anyway, so what I was talking about is we can either take this into Maya and just quickly do the geometry details there, or we can jump into the ZModeler and then adjust the geometry accordingly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to right click on it, and oh, by the way, the ZModeler is basically like your Maya's version of extrude and bevel and bridge and insert edge loop and multi-cuts and all those fancy things. So this is where the power lies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to poly loop, and actually in fact I'm going to say bevel as my main tool. I'm going to be beveling the whole loop. So when I click on that, it's going to bevel that whole section right there. Okay, same thing applies to the opposite side. Let's see. Don't want to bevel that. I want to bevel this edge. Something like that. And then what I want to do is collapse some of these vertices. I'm going to move my mouse over a vertex, right click on it. I'm going to say stitch. And in the options it's stitch 2 points, and you can say to the middle. And then I'm just going to make my brush smaller and click. Click. Same thing on the opposite side. Just to reduce the poly count, you don't need that many components to describe that bevel corner. Same thing on this side. Just going to collapse these 2 points. Same thing on this side. Let's see. Click. 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 And one more. There we go. Hit Control W just to polyframe everything the same color. And hit F. Okay, that's what I want. Excellent. So now I can go ahead to my geometry tab, uncheck my smooth, divide, divide, and then turn on smooth. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Now we have enough polygons to go ahead and carve in some details, round out some edges, those corners. Excellent. By the way, did that answer your question? Caliber skill. Cool, man. Pleasure. There's a few other sculpting tools that you can utilize as well. You can look at Sculptress. It's a free version. It's a free version that Pixelogic provides for people to use. It doesn't have as many fancy settings and things to tweak, but it's still a pretty damn good sculpting tool. It does work mainly with triangles. That's why it's called Sculptress or Sculptrise, depending on how you want to pronounce it. But yeah, that's a good one. Then there's a few other ones. I forgot one of the names. I'll just quickly look it up on the other screen. I know Blender has a built-in version of a sculpting tool. Cinema 4D has its own built-in sculpting functions. Modo, Sculptures, and there's another one, I just can't remember the name of it now. Give me a shout out if you know of any other sculpting tools that I haven't mentioned so far. Okay, I think enough of this scratching. I'm going to jump onto my orb/brush. Yeah, Blender 3D, yeah, that definitely. Anything else? Oh yeah, now I remember, it's called 3D Coat. That's what it's called. That's a personal preference, man. Honest truth is, it depends on which studio you're going to be working for. That's the first thing you need to take in consideration. Second of all is, at the end of the day, it's just a tool. You can do pretty much the same stuff in Maya as you can do in Max. It all depends on how comfortable you are with the actual tool. With that in mind, 3D Studio Max does have a lot more architectural specialized tools to make your level designing and those kind of things a lot easier. Whereas Maya, I would say, is a little bit more convenient for organic kind of sculpting or modeling rather. And it's more free-form. If you're kind of used to very much linear-based workflows and everything has very consistent, choices that you have to make, then I would say 3D Studio Max is definitely your best bet. And if you're using Maya, then it's a complete free-flow workflow. It's up to you. There's like 10,000 different ways of getting to the same result, and it's up to your own personal experience to kind of choose which path you're going to be taking. With that said, if you choose Blender, if you use some of the other production-based kind of modeling tools, like Modo, for instance, they're all ending up with the same kind of approach. Some of them are a little bit more customized or more specialized in certain fields, especially like the Boolean functions in Modo is just phenomenal. But nowadays, a lot of guys are now creating online plugins for Maya that does pretty much exactly the same thing. And in fact, I'm going to mention one specific one that I personally think it's amazing, and it's called oh my goodness, now I forgot the name. It's a little plugin that allows you to do booleans, cut out shapes out of models, and so on. If I remember the name, I'll show you guys. But it's really, really good. I'm just going to launch Maya here on the other screen. It's probably going to pop up on this screen now. Yeah, I thought so. But that's fine. So yeah, just to get back to your question, it's up to you to decide. Low polygame assets, there's a lot of studios that's specifically focusing on Maya, and then there's other studios that's focusing on 3D Studio Max. And all you have to do is choose the software that you're going to work with. I would say there's a benefit in having both of them, so that you can make your options open for future use. I'm just going to move it off to the other screen. I don't want to put this in view all the time. Let's have a look. I hope that answers your question. Let's have a look. Bring this into the other view as well. I'm just trying to find the name for you guys. It's that Boolean tool that I was talking about earlier. Yeah, this is gonna take too long. I can't remember what the plugin's name is, but it's pretty awesome. Just look it up online. Just type in Boolean tools for Maya, and you'll probably find the plugin. So I'm gonna continue with this guy, and if you guys have any other questions, just ask away. Cool, man. Pleasure. I'm glad I can help. Now, at the end of the day, like I said, it's just a tool. It's like asking what's better. Is a pen better versus a pencil? You know, they all do the same thing. And it's up to how you use it, and not necessarily the tool that's making you such an amazing artist. So just keep that in mind. Have to be careful not to add too many of these details. Rather have variation in depth, so you kind of make it seem more interesting. Kind of bring down the intensity a bit more. And look at the model from the back side as well. Just bringing everything back into view. How's it, Andre? Yep, that's the right side. I'm glad I sculpted on this side. I'm just going to go ahead and carve in a little bit more detail on the edges, because that's the stuff that will be viewed mostly. So I'm not too concerned about the inner sides, as that's not going to be visible at all. So I'm just going to go ahead and maybe add some kind of lines running this way as well. And then some of the clay brush details, just to kind of build up some volumes in between. Maybe carve out some details as well. No, thank you. I think I just closed that application in the background. OSD. There we go. Okay, cool. So I'm going to carve this out a little bit more. Build up the volume a little bit more as well, just to create some separation and height. At the same time, it adds more surface noise as well, which makes it more interesting. I'm going to flatten some of it using the trim dynamic brush. A quick question I want to ask you guys: is there when I'm mentioning these things, should I be more specific about the hotkeys and things that I'm pressing and doing, or is the overview of watching me doing something more important? Cool, man. Pleasure. I'm glad to be back as well. It's been a hectic time for me trying to balance life and my creative side as well. So don't know how long it's going to be like this, but for now you can enjoy watching. I'm going to jump back to my slash brush. Cool beans, that's looking good. I'm gonna just do a rough pass down here. I'm not too concerned about that, especially because it's not going to be viewed from that side. I'm more focused on the top section. And I'm going to use my clay build-up brush as well, maybe solo this guy, and use a small brush to kind of fill in some of this extra noise. Carve this down maybe. Let's quickly read. This is not Maya, this is actually ZBrush. Or are you talking about the off-screen thing that I was trying to do? Yeah, this is ZBrush. It's a digital sculpting tool. It essentially allows you to import base meshes into ZBrush, and then you can use brushes to sculpt on the mesh. Very, very powerful. If you look at any feature film or any movie or any game for that matter, you're probably looking at something that was mostly sculpted in ZBrush, and at least some degree, not everything, but to a large extent. So definitely look into ZBrush as your choice of software for sculpting, especially if you want to take this serious and want to get into the industry. You're gonna have to be using ZBrush for, you know, enhancing your sculpted surfaces and details. I don't see a world without ZBrush. It's just that awesome. And yeah, okay, that's looking good. Let's go back out of solo mode. Cool, man. Pleasure. Yeah, I think this little OSD window really does help quite a bit in terms of understanding what I'm doing to make this process easier. These two are overlapping a bit, so what I'm going to do is just kind of drop down to the lowest subdiv, as you can see, and then what I'm going to do is grab my move tool and just nudge this out, making my brush nice and big using the S key, and then sliding the size and then pulling this out. That way, when I go back up again, you don't move like thousands of polygons at the same time. You're just moving the lower shape, and everything else just kind of propagates back down to where it's supposed to be. I think I'm still going to end up with some nails or some sort of objects that's going to be keeping these things together. But for now, I'm going to leave it like that. This side needs some detailing as well. Anything wrong with Mudbox? No, not at all. Mudbox is super, super cool. I've been teaching Mudbox and ZBrush for a good 5 years now, and I would say for any beginner that is the best tool to get into if you're still learning the basics of modeling. With that said, I am all for ZBrush because it gives me all the power that I need. Just think of Mudbox as your Maya companion. It gives you exactly the same shortcuts as Maya, so there's no weird readaptation of hotkeys and all those kind of things. It's for the most part a straight go in. Your user interface hotkeys are pretty much the same to rotate your cameras. but the lack of brushes are quite shocking. And yes, you do have like alphas and stamps and stencils to make your brushes more controlled. But I mean, if you look at this, for instance, you know, you've got so many different brushes, and the cool thing here is you can customize your brushes. You can change all these extra parameters over here to make your brush act exactly the way you want. Now if you had to do this in Mudbox, it's just not going to be giving you that level of control. But if you're still learning how to get into 3D and digital sculpting, I would say start off with Mudbox. Get used to the understanding of what digital sculpting really is all about, and then from there, if you feel more comfortable and you're actually getting the effects that you want, and you start feeling a bit limited with your your brushes, then I would say maybe start looking into ZBrush. But it's all up to you, personal preference. I love jumping into a very difficult piece of software and learn it from the ground up. That's what I did in the beginning. I don't say everyone needs to do this because it is a difficult application to get used to, especially the weird way of how the hotkeys work and so on. But it's just because you're so used to working with hotkeys that was drilled into your head from another piece of software, and then having to learn a completely different way of working and navigating. That's where people tend to get more confused. So if you started off with ZBrush and then jump to another software, you'll actually feel like, wow, ZBrush is so much easier than all the other applications, because the hotkeys are so organic and so easy to navigate. So it's kind of a funny situation. It's a catch-22. If you just get over the initial frustration of what and how ZBrush works, then you'll actually enjoy it quite a bit. So yeah, that's my 2 cents for that. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, just like you said, Mudbox is so easy. You can literally learn it in 20, 30, 40 minutes. It's that easy. I wouldn't say the whole software, but everything that you need to get you started with sculpting. I remember back in the day, before Mudbox was part of Autodesk, it was part of SkyMatter, and I saw it in a magazine, and I think it was still in beta phase or something, and I was so impressed with it back then. And by that time I didn't know of any other sculpting software like ZBrush, and so I got straight into it, and it literally took me like maybe 1 20-minute video online. At that point it was very difficult to find tutorials on it because it was still so fresh and so brand new. And so I just stuck with it like for a day or two, and I was so easy to get into. And then when I got into ZBrush, I was like, dude, this is so cool. This is way more powerful than Mudbox. So they all have benefits. Another benefit of Mudbox over ZBrush is that in Mudbox you actually paint directly onto your UV textures, so you're not limited to things like the amount of polygons to paint your texture or your RGB values on. So What I mean by that is in ZBrush you actually work with polygons, or let's rather call it pixels. And so when you subdivide your mesh, you're increasing the total amount of polygons, and then each polygon represents one RGB value. And for every RGB value, you can paint a color. So that means if you need, a good dense high resolution texture, you need to subdivide your mesh to a very high resolution for it to be functional and for it to look good. So in that case, if you end up with like a 32 million polygon model and it still does not feel dense enough in pixel resolution, then it's not going to be as easy as just quickly subdividing it again, because if you subdivide a 32 million polygon model then you're going to be ending up with a very, very large amount of polygons, and that is definitely an issue. So Mudbox on the other side paints directly onto the UV coordinates, so it makes it a lot easier because you're working on the texture resolution and not on the polygon count. So that's another thing. Cool, I think that's okay for now. That feels right. Cool. Yeah, absolutely. You can start off with the model straight in Maya, and then send it into ZBrush, and then detailing it further from there. Or you could start straight into ZBrush. So, would you guys like to see that? Just give me a thumbs up or a quick like if you want me to show you guys. ZBrush is a full-on polygon modeling tool as well. It's not just a sculpting tool. They've added quite a few fancy features. Okay, I'm going to unsolo this, pull back, have a look at it. Okay, that's fine. And I'm going to update a few things here. Come on guys, I want to see those thumbs up. Okay, that's looking good. I'm happy with that. I do feel like these need to be a lot more deeper. So I'm going to increase the Z depth. Just from a distance that reads a lot better if it's nice and deep. I'll zoom into that section. I've heard that you have to do the Retopology export mesh from ZBrush to Maya. Yeah, so that is both true and incorrect. Or I wouldn't say incorrect, it just means that it depends on the workflow that you're going to be ending up taking. So for example, if you start off with a base mesh that has everything that you need to end up with a final model, you don't have to rebuild the mesh again unless you push the actual model in ZBrush to such an extent where it's the silhouette completely changes, and now the low poly mesh does not have enough polygons to represent the added additional sculpting effects. So then you need to go and retopologize the mesh and then bring that back into Maya, or you can just retopologize that inside of Maya. So it's just a different way of working. So if you stick with a low poly mesh and you send that into ZBrush and just add enough surface detail to represent, some noise, but you're not pushing the silhouette to the extent where it now, veers off of the original model, then that should be fine. That you don't have to retopologize it again. In fact, that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm trying to sculpt the meshes and just add enough surface noise to represent the overall, detail, but I'm not trying to push it to suddenly have some sort of a mushroom growing out of it or whatever. So the other way would be to say, you know what, I'm going to make a mesh. It's not going to be anything specific, it's just going to be a basic shape. I'm going to bring that into ZBrush, and then I'm going to dynamesh that together. And once I've dynameshed that together, I can then use that to build my final model as a high resolution model. And then I would retopologize it, and then I would send that back to Maya. It's just two different ways of approaching it. One is more creative and freeform, and you can change things as you like, whereas the other one is you stick to the base mesh and you don't veer off of that shape. So the one, you start off doing more work in the beginning, and then you're enjoying yourself with the creative process at the end, and then you don't have to go and rebuild a new mesh afterwards. Whereas the other one is more of a creative freeform. You're not committing yourself to a base mesh shape in the beginning. You're just starting off with a very simple shape, and you push that shape in ZBrush, and then after that you build a brand new mesh. I hope that makes sense. Cool, man. Pleasure. I'm glad you're enjoying my videos. I'd like to help people out. If I can have more people joining my videos, helping me out, then that would be fantastic. I was actually thinking on doing this thing where I create a Patreon website, and then you guys can pay a certain whatever you feel like my videos are worth per month, and then once I reached my goal, I can buy new equipment to make my tutorials more professional and give you better content at the end of the day. I will also then create like packs of textures or packs of models or base meshes that you can utilize in your own projects, all for a simple payment. Are you guys interested in that? Is it something that you would be willing to do? If yes, then I would gladly start looking into that direction as well. I might even start a mentorship at some point. Give me your feedback. Tell me your thoughts. I'm going to quickly save again. Cool, man. I've never seen Rust. Let me quickly have a look online what it looks like. Let's type in Rust. Oh geez, that looks pretty cool, man. What type of game is this? Pleasure, mate. If you want more hands-on kind of training, I'm definitely keen on starting some sort of a mentorship. I'm trying to work towards maybe providing some online accreditation of sorts, because I am an official Autodesk certified trainer. So I teach that on a professional basis every year at a training center here in South Africa. And so if that's something that people are interested in, then we can maybe look into that, starting off like little workshops and like having a few people working together on little projects and so on. Yeah, man, exactly. That's the idea. So if you're willing to pay like, let's say $20 or something per month, then I'm definitely willing to give out like texture packs and things that I've created myself, or like assets with, like for instance, pre-made collectors packs with brushes and stuff with ZBrush. Alright, so it's a survival game. Cool. Anyway, let me continue. Oh yeah, I was actually still going to show you guys how to do that other thing, how to build a mesh straight out of ZBrush. And so I want to show you guys this. I'm going to jump to a different tool. Let's go to Simple Brush, switch, and go to the Simple Brush. You can start start off with a little quick primitive mesh, like let's say one of these guys. Actually, it doesn't really matter what you choose. I can do like a polystar. And down here we have options to initialize this and convert this into a polycube or a cylinder. There is, let me look at some other options. Here, draw this out. Hit Control N to clear my canvas, and so you can rotate that simple primitive, and then if I click on this Q cube, it actually convert this thing into a perfect cube with different colors on all sides if you have your polyframe on. And then from there you can start manipulating this to your liking. So I'm going to turn on my symmetry so I can manipulate both sides at the same time. And then we have the ZModeler over here, which technically is like your Maya's equivalent of a modeling package. So you can right click on these components and it brings up like a whole menu of different tools and stuff. So basically these are your tools, and this is the target that you have selected. So like if I hover over this center of a face, then that's your target. If I hover over an edge, that's your target. If I hover over a vertex, same thing. So let's say I want to extrude this part over here. I can then go here and then say extrude, and then you can choose the target. Do you want to do a single poly? And then if you then left click and drag, you can actually pull that straight out, and you can keep doing that as many times as you like. If you want to do it to that whole section, you can actually just go straight to all polygons, and then it does that whole cube. Or you can do based on polygon island. So an island just represents is represented by the different colors. So if I right click and I say island, then I can just go sorry, it's the wrong one. We want polygroups. Polygroup all. Polyloop, polygroup, polyloop. Let's have a look. Flat border. Let's see. Yeah, flat border is a nice way to do that. We can jump to like a bevel tool, for instance, and then you can either bevel a face, and that's going to bevel it inwards, like you would do an extrude in Maya with some sort of an offset inwards. You can also hover over the edges and then choose bevel, and then you choose your target, so polyloop, edge loop complete, and that goes ahead. Sorry, let me just choose the right tool here. Bevel, complete, and then when you apply that, it creates that for you. As long as you have your symmetry on, it does it to the other side as well. Another one which is quite nice is going to be like your ZModeler Q mesh. This one is a combined tool for different effects. So again, you have to choose whatever you want, like a single poly. You can do polyloop flat, and it does that. Looks at the angles and it does the polyloop up to where it transitions directionality, and then you can add that. You can also hold down Alt and quickly select only the faces that you want to have part of that quick selection, and then it does that extrusion for you, which is freaking fantastic. So I like doing that kind of stuff. Yes, this does not look like anything special, but I mean, look at this, for instance. I can go ahead now and do a Q mesh, and then do a just leave the settings as is. I'm going to hold down Alt, click, and select all of this. I'm going to push this back, and you can see what that does. It kind of rounds it out for you. And if you push this all the way through, it will punch it all the way through for you as well. Let me just extend. Just undo that. Just select those guys, extrude it out a little bit. Maybe highlight these guys as well. And then if I click and drag all the way through, I can push that all the way through. Let's just do that as polygroup inner. No, that's not going to work. Let's try single faces. Push that through, and there you have it. Very, very powerful way of modeling. And we can use the basic transpose tool to mask out sections, invert the mask, draw out a transpose line, and then in the move mode you can click in the middle and then move things around. And if I click that center circle and hold down shift, it's going to snap to go only straight up. I'm going to clear the mask out here, do that for the bottom, inverse it, click and drag transpose line, click, hold down shift and drag it out. and very quickly I'm able to build some very simplified primitive shapes and take it from there. So I'm not going to do a full-on tutorial on that, as it's not really part of this tutorial or this video. I'll do that as a separate one if you guys want to watch that later. Let's quickly check. Any questions so far? Okay guys, this has been going on for 2 hours now. If you don't have any other questions, I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna love and leave you. I'll probably be up again tomorrow. For now, I'm just gonna say adios. I'm gonna leave in just a bit. I just want to check if there's anyone that still wants to ask me any questions. If not, then I will be going. Well, if you guys want to get in contact with me, definitely send me some messages over YouTube, or you can just send me a straight email on my Gmail, and then I will answer some questions for you guys. If you just look me up, Angelblade Corvus, on my YouTube channel, or Maya Sensei, and then we can take it from there. Cool guys, no questions? Then I will be going. Okay guys, I'm gonna be going now. Talk soon, and thanks for watching. I appreciate the time that you guys spent with me. Ciao!